Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show Crosstalk. Well, the other day, the United States published what it deemed a declassified report on the murder of Saudi journalist Adnan Khashoggi. Um, and it wasn't really a declassified report. It's basically essentially an executive summary, much of which it was itself redacted. The general conclusion was something that most people had already assumed for some time, that the man behind this murder was MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. In the United States, the Biden administration imposed some sanctions against Saudi individuals, but it did not impose sanctions on Mohammed bin Salman. Um, the Biden administration spokesperson, Jen Psaki, was asked about this. Why no sanctions against MBS? And she said, well, we don't impose sanctions against leaders of countries. This, of course, is absolute nonsense because the United States does this on a regular basis, and even this was even too much for CNN, which pointed out, well, what about President Maduro of Venezuela or Bashar al-Assad of Syria, and on the list goes. So as things stand, no sanctions against MBS for the time being. There's a couple of things that come strike me. In the first place, really, the murder of Khashoggi, brutal, vicious, nasty as it undoubtedly is par for the course for a brutal, vicious, nasty regime, something we've known for decades. It's still not a matter for the United States. I mean, it really is, that's what it is something that Saudi Arabia did. Now, it's true that Khashoggi had a visa and was living in the United States on a visa, but nonetheless, he wasn't a US citizen. He didn't even have a green card. He was a columnist for the Washington Post. So again, it's very odd to start conditioning diplomatic relations with another state on what it does internally, no matter how brutal. And the other thing is, of course, that the United States seems to be in a position now of antagonizing Iran and antagonizing Saudi Arabia without any real sense of direction. What is it that the Biden administration is trying to achieve? If you want to do something about Iran, you need Saudi Arabia. If you want to minimize Saudi Arabia and its influence on US policy in the Middle East, you need Iran. But antagonizing both doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Peter, what's your take?
Well, it's really quite interesting too that this is a continuation of the Trump administration, and the primary reason why people got upset about Khashoggi, let's be honest, okay, it's because of the way Trump treated the dreadful murder and his reaction to the regime. And Biden is doing essentially the same thing. And so this is where you and I predicted this long ago, is that this Trump derangement syndrome it's going to keep coming out because, okay, Biden bombed Syria, and then, when Trump did it, but in the same there are people that say, well, that's illegal under Trump, but it's okay under Biden. Again, all of these things are coming out. Another thing with Saudi Arabia, yes, it is recognized as a state. It is a member of the United Nations, but it's a family, is what it is. Okay, and MBS is not the head of state; he's the crown prince. When I've always much preferred is a little bit of honesty, as brutal as it may be. Okay, we need Saudi Arabia because we need it as an anchor against Iran. I mean, just be honest about it. Okay, just be honest about it. If it's right or wrong, we can debate that, but that's essentially what policy is here. So you avoid an enormous amount of hypocrisy that way, okay? And then coddling dictators. Again, this all this rhetoric is ridiculous. And for someone like Jen Psaki, I would posit she wasn't lying. She doesn't know, George. She simply doesn't know these things. She demonstrated this when she was over at the State Department under Obama. I mean, she made a complete laughing stock out of herself on a regular basis, and now she's doing it for the entire administration.
Right.
So, and what it also does is it is the purposeful deception to the American people. Because if the American people had a better knowledge, a wider knowledge of our politics in the Middle East, I think most of them would actually be quite horrified by it. But if you don't tell people, you can't be upset about it. And there is an entire think tanks, soft power. Sorry, my lunch just arrived. Infrastructure to make sure people don't know what American foreign policy is in the Middle East. I don't know how many people caught it, but Tucker Carlson had this jackass on again, former State Department official. I'll never be able to pronounce the guy's name.
That was a terrible interview, incidentally. It was one of Tucker Carlson's worst performances ever. This is this guy, I think, David Takfiri, that he's had on before, but I don't know. I don't know what the point of this interview was. I mean, he just gave.
Well, I kind of quite liked it because he did push back.
Right, but
he did push back.
I thought ineffectively. I mean, but anyway, I thought.
Well,
I mean, there are better arguments against what Biden is doing with regard to Syria than saying, "Hey, why doesn't he do something about China?" That just doesn't seem like a very convincing argument. I mean, China is China.
Okay. Whoa. Okay. I got. Now I understand your point. I agree with you in that sense. Absolutely agree with you. However, casting enormous doubt over American involvement in the Middle East over the last few decades, he did make that point, and he made it repeatedly. I agree with you. I think in the Middle East and China are apples and oranges. I think they're very different things, because being in the Middle East is a choice. It's a choice. Okay. Now, rising powers. If we can take the ideology out of it, okay, this is something that's been time honored in time immemorial. Empires rise, empires fall. Great powers come, great powers go. Okay, the United States has to decide what is going to happen to itself. Okay, but it has so many interconnections with China, which profit people personally, that it's going to be very difficult for the U.S. to navigate that relationship. We see it right now.
Right. Okay? No. But I mean, but the point was that Takfiri was, he was able to just to say, well, America's, forceful stability, in the Middle East, when it's quite obvious that United States is nothing of the sort. There is no way in the world that bombing Syria in order to retaliate against Iranian-backed militias does anything at all for stability. And it's a ridiculous argument to make, but nonetheless, this is part of the creed of the foreign policy making elite of Washington, that somehow all these U.S. military actions are creating stability, when you only have to watch the news, and then any time you say, well, this is a force for instability. I mean, this is how you can guarantee that there will be instability. Now, in terms of Saudi Arabia, I mean, there are a lot worse. I mean, if you're going to have a list of grievances against Saudi Arabia, there are a lot worse grievances the United States has than the murder of Khashoggi. As I say, Khashoggi was not an American citizen. And so therefore, there wasn't any direct American interest in it. But on the other hand, the Saudi involvement in the 9/11 terrorist attacks is still covered in darkness. We still don't know the full extent of it. The little we know is very, very disturbing. But a lot of it still remains hidden. Now that is something that the United States would like to know about. That for the sake of maintaining this alliance, we have overlooked Saudi sponsorship of terrorism around the world, and particularly Saudi sponsorship of terrorism directed at the United States.
I don't know if you saw Michael Moore's film Fahrenheit 9/11. It's actually a good film. I think he lost his mind years later. But there was one snippet of the film that was very eye-opening to me. Is it the American Secret Service, the Secret Service that protects the President of the United States and other senior officials? They protect the Saudi embassy. I think it's the only embassy that is given that kind of treatment. Okay, that shows you. It shows they have so much money invested in the stock market, and this is a regime that goes out and murders people in foreign consulates. Okay, are they that crazy to take their money out of the U.S. stock market? Yeah, they are. Okay, and it would crash the financial system. Okay, so this is a very dangerous toxic embrace. Okay, and the U.S. I mean, there's so many interests that want to stay. I've always said on Crosstalk, that this is the mantra: don't say much about Israel and never say anything about Saudi Arabia. Okay, and that's the way it's treated in the American media. Oh, that's exactly the way it is. We have the Abraham Accords that these nuts in the Republican Party still talk about. No, that's not about peace. Those countries weren't at war with Israel. Okay, what it was a way is to keep the United States in the Middle East. Read the fine print. It's about trade agreements, arms agreements. It's a way. See, this was a switch and bait. Creating peace. No, it's a way to stay. Okay. And in that way, the way the Trump administration sold it is completely false the way they sold it. Okay. And this was at the behest of Saudi Arabia, because what it gives now is that the UAE, Bahrain, now Saudi Arabia is next in line, or maybe a few other states, but it's in line to recognize Israel as an anti-Iranian front.
Right.
So what they want to do is the Saudis want the Saudis want Washington to kill American troops to defeat Iran. That's what it is, and Israel will be on the sideline and watch. This is how stupid this policy has been ever since 1945.
Well, yeah, but at least the Trump administration had a coherent policy. I mean, during the 2016 election, Trump sounded very skeptical about Saudi Arabia and the alliance with Saudi Arabia. He changed policy drastically once he assumed office, and once he embarked on a very hostile policy toward Iran, he embraced Saudi Arabia, and then basically
sloppy seconds
everything else that Saudi Arabia did. And so when he's essentially said about the murder of Khashoggi, them's the breaks, nothing to do with us. Though a cynical policy, it's also a policy in accord with realpolitik. I mean, that's what countries do. They say, okay, well, too bad. After all, Russia has its own problems with Saudi Arabia. I mean, it wasn't happy with the with its policies on oil. Trying to essentially drive down the price of oil with its overproduction. It's had its problems. Nonetheless, it doesn't condition its policy with Saudi Arabia on the murder of a journalist. So Putin manages to maintain rather friendly relations. I remember it was soon after the murder of the Khashoggi when Putin and MBS met, I think, at one of the G20 meetings, and they kind of high-fived each other. It was a very friendly gesture. But I think it was Putin just saying, hey, it's just that's not how we condition our relations with other states. And I think that was also Trump's position. Now, as you say, the people who hated Trump made a whole huge issue out of Khashoggi. But now, they have egg on their face because now they too think, well, are we really going to condition our relations with Saudi Arabia on Khashoggi? And so they kind of twist themselves into pretzels where, yeah, it's terrible, terrible, and we're going to impose sanctions, but not against MBS. And let me think, why not against MBS? So, yeah, so that, that it's the Democrats who have kind of got themselves into this mess.
Well, I mean, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. The United States didn't have its policy towards Iran. I mean, I even think that at this point, you really don't need Saudi Arabia at all. I think this is a bad alliance, and it's going to end up in a
Right. No, I think that's right. And I think that what's kind of interesting is that if you want to lessen your dependence on Saudi Arabia, then you should think about alternative sources of cheap energy, and that is what Russia is providing with its natural gas. So you can't really be, because this guy, this Takfiri guy, was saying, well, because when I think Tucker Carlson made that point, well, we don't really need Saudi oil. He said, yeah, but what about our allies? Our allies, they need the Saudi oil. And says, okay, well, if you're so worried about your allies, and then you should support, natural gas from Russia. And of course, they don't. They're against that as well. So it's not a policy that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, it's not up to the United States to determine the energy policies of other countries. Other countries have to make that decision themselves. Okay, I don't know why that is a burden that's put on the United States, and it's not. It shouldn't be. It's ridiculous. But I mean, going back to the situation in the Middle East, I mean, why is it the United States that has to deal with Iran? It should deal with its region. Iranians fine. The Israelis do fine.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's exactly right. Yeah, I think the United States has embraced this, and now gets itself into this, absurd position.
Why?
Yeah. No, it makes that makes no sense. And it looks like the Biden.
What do we get out of it? What do we get out of it? Nothing.
None at all. None at all. Exactly. I mean, it's you're pursuing an anti-Iran policy, which again, what's the benefit of that? Now, one could argue, okay, we're stopping the Iranian nuclear weapons program, but they don't have a nuclear weapons program.
They don't.
So it's like you're stopping something that Iran is not even pursuing. So it's again you got yourself into this mess, very serious dangers of military confrontation for a policy that really there's no need for it, because Iran isn't pursuing a nuclear. They've made it clear, and there's no evidence that Iran has ever pursued a nuclear weapons program.
It would be as if having sanctions against Iran for its export of alcohol, but it doesn't export alcohol. Okay, they don't drink. Okay.
All right. Well,
but just one thing, it just shows the absurdity of being anti-Trump and his policies, and then when you come out at the other end, the other bookend, you get yourself tied up in the pretzels, just like you said.
Yes, sir. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Peter. We will, of course, maintain our laser-like focus on the doings on the Middle East. Remember, we are now on Rumble. Look us up on Rumble, and we will be back. So if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.